Hi folks, it's Rob Flux here again for another Sunday session coming to you, I guess, live from, my bedroom, or not my bedroom, my spare room, my study. Every single week we come to you with a different topic of the week. This particular week we're talking to you about what development uplift or what sort of uplift you get from a price perspective when you have a development application approved for your site. Now, it's going to be a relatively short session today. I guess the topic is, whilst very interesting, there's actually not a lot to it from a content perspective. So with that in mind, if you have any questions at all in this regard, I'm going to encourage you to get in very, very early with those, and I will do my best to answer them live as we go. Now, I can see a number of people jumping on board already, so hi to everybody. How are you? So whilst I'm waiting for everyone else to jump on board, just want to do a little bit of an around the grounds and let you know some upcoming events that we've got coming up in the next month, which is quite exciting for us here. We're going through quite a large growth phase at the moment, and we're seeing some fantastic numbers coming to some of our events coming up, which is what I want to touch on right now. So in the next 3 weeks, we've got 3 very special events in addition to our normal meetups. So we have normal meetups in Brisbane, Sydney, and Melbourne. And in addition to those, we're having an extra bonus session in the morning at each of those venues. It came about from some questions that I asked just before Christmas, where I put a question out to the community saying, what is your biggest property challenge? And I was inundated with over 250 responses to that question. And what we've done is collate those questions, and a number of them are very, a lot of you are struggling with the same issues and challenges. So what I thought I'd do is try and cover a lot of that common ground where we could. We had some questions where we had over 40 people asking about. We had other questions where it was, over 30 and, over 25, that sort of thing. So trying to collate as many of those as humanly possible, and we're going to cover that in a special session. So if you are in Brisbane, that very special session is on the 15th of February, which is next weekend. So that will be in the morning, and then in the afternoon, we'll have our normal meetup. If you are in Sydney, then it's going to be on the 22nd of February. Again, the special event will be in the morning and the normal meetup will be in the afternoon. And if you are in Melbourne, we've got a special date for you. It's going to be the 29th of February. That means that we're having 2 meetups in Melbourne in February in the 1 month. So please don't get confused by that slightly different date change. Again, info session in the morning, what we're calling Development Launchpad, and then our normal regular meetup in the afternoon. Now, it is critical, given that the numbers that we've got, I'm actually quite concerned. We have actually doubled the size of the rooms in almost all of the venues, and it looks like we are still going to struggle with seating. So with that in mind, if you are genuinely interested in coming, I'm going to put a link to you right here, right now. Make sure I can just copy that from my clipboard. And if you are genuinely interested in coming, you have to register for the morning session and the afternoon session separately. Okay, they are actually 2 different events, so it's important that you register for both of those separately. So that's kind of what's coming up, folks. Now, I can see Luke has a question. How do I make money? Question mark. No worries, Luke. We are going to cover that, mate. All well and good, mate. That'll come in good stead. So the topic of today is, how much uplift do you get from a development application? Now, this is one where I guess it's a common misconception in the industry, and especially through the, I guess, uneducated people in the industry that seem to think that automatically having a development application will give you an uplift. And I'm here to tell you that in many, many instances, it won't give you an uplift. And in other instances, I've seen where it's actually been detrimental to the price, because it's given insights into a property that probably has highlighted some issues and challenges there. So very simplistically, whenever you're looking at doing a development uplift, now, I'm going to go back 2 steps before I go into this bit. Some people have a strategy of, I'm going to buy the site, put the development application, and then on flick it because I don't have the money to take it all the way through to construction. And so they're wanting to know what that uplift is that they're going to get from that, which is, I guess, a perfectly valid approach and a very excellent strategy if that's what you're doing, so long as you can actually work out the fundamentals. Other people have a different approach where they don't want the risk of the development approval stage. They want to just take the DA for what it is, take it as a finished known entity, and then take that through to construction and take that through to completion. Again, a perfectly valid strategy. So knowing that those two kinds of people actually sit there and exist, you've got to make sure that each person is actually going to get fed in the food chain and leave enough enough money on the table for the next guy. So how much is that? I guess that's the million-dollar question that we're all looking for. So how we need to determine this is right at the very, 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 very start, assuming that it's a raw site, okay? Assuming that it's a very raw site. When you go through your feasibility stage, no matter what your exit strategy is, you need to be doing a feasibility that would assess it all the way through to the end as if somebody is going to be taking it on. And you want to make sure that before you acquire the site in its raw state, that there is actually development potential to start with. That's probably the first statement that I'd actually make. And I need to make that because 90% of the sites out there that are developable are not profitable. And I see many, many people grab sites that they think are going to be profitable only to find that they're not. Then when they add the development uplift and they try to flick it, they wonder why they don't get anything from it. So that's the first part of the equation, is make sure you get your feasibility right at the very start. Now, we've covered feasibilities in a couple of other Sunday sessions, so I'm not going to go over that today, other than to say very, very simplistically, it's about identifying all the issues and challenges that you need to identify on the property and all the problems that you need to solve and being able to cost those. And then knowing what the finished product is actually going to sell for. And if you can do those two things, then the feasibility is really the adding and subtracting of the two in the middle. Assuming you've got a development that is going to be profitable, then what you've got to think of is, well, if I'm going to be exiting the property, then one, I've got some costs to actually put my development in place. Two, the person that's actually going to take this on is going to incur additional costs over and above me, because if you think about it, you're buying it once and paying stamp duty, and then you're selling it with agent's commission, and then they're going to buy it with another set of stamp duty and going to pay another lot of agent's commission. So it's actually less profitable for somebody to take on your existing DA approved site. And so you need to make sure that there is plenty of fat that you leave on the table for the next guy. Okay, so that's part of the part of the equation that you need to consider is the additional costs that are going to be duplicated by trying to flick it halfway through. Now, for the next guy to take it on, he's got to have money left in the table. So if your feasibility, I'm going to be trying to be very simplistically here. A lot of people on a 2-year type development, whether it be say a townhouse project or a unit complex, they're looking for the magical 20% profit on cost for the entire project from start to finish. If somebody's taking on just the DA approved site, then they're going to want to see at least 15% left in the deal when you flick it. So if you happen to have got a site that had a 30% profit on cost right at the very, very start, then you may be able to get, I guess, the first 15% and still leave 15% on the table. If, however, you only got a site that was, say, 18% profit on cost, then your uplift is only going to be about 3% because you need to still leave that 15% on the table for the next guy. Now, the 15% is I'm going to say it's a mythical number. Everyone has a different goalpost on what that is. But if you're not leaving that sort of money on the table, then most developers taking on that finished product are going to struggle getting finance. Because most of the finance companies don't want to fund anything unless it gets a minimum of that 15%. So if you're not leaving that there, then invariably it's not going to be attractive to the next person taking on. And if there's no money for the next guy taking it on, they're not going to take it off your hands. So equally, when you're looking to take on a DA approved site, you're going to want to make sure that those that you've still got at least that much left on the table, factoring in the fact that you've had those additional costs in there. So that's simplistically as hard as the process gets. How much uplift do I get? The problem that I see is that many people put the wrong DA on there. Okay, and so when you're assessing a site, that quite often there's 3, 4, 5 different ways of actually doing your development approval. And some people haven't assessed their market right. They haven't assessed the demographics right. They haven't looked at the supply and demand, and they put a development approval on there, and it's provided no additional DA uplift to the site because there's just not going to be any demand for the finished product that's actually there. And they didn't do the homework right at the very start to see whether or not that was actually going to be attractive to the next guy. So they might have spent anywhere between 30 or 200,000, depending upon the complexity of the project, doing the development approval, and it's added absolutely zero to the uplift. Okay. Equally, it could be that they have picked the right product, but maybe they've got a poor design or a poor flow. They've not done their market research and stuff. So if your strategy is to be doing DA approval and flick, make sure that right at the very start, you're looking at all of the market demands, all the supply and demand. What is that area looking for from a product perspective? What level of fixtures and fittings and all those sorts of things? Because if you get that wrong, then the product that you create, one, is going to be incorrect, and two, the sale of the finished product is simply just not going to match. I have seen other development applications where they've hit it spot on and added massive uplifts into the area. So it really comes down to whether or not you've actually done that homework there. Now, as I said, folks, it is going to be a relatively short session because in reality, that's as complicated as it gets. Is do your homework on that finished product, make sure that the site is both developable and profitable, and make sure you've left enough money on the table for the next guy. And if you've left enough money on the table for the next guy and the deal had plenty of fat in it the first time, then you can get anywhere from 0 uplift to a shit ton of uplift. And I'll say that's a metric shit ton, not an imperial shit ton. And excuse the French. But the amount of uplift is really dependent on the demand of the product. So I'm going to put it over to you guys because it's going to be a relatively short session today. I want to hear some questions from you. So Luke says, how do I make money? Well, the short question to that, Luke, is you make money by making sure that you've got the right product in the right area with the right demand, and that there is plenty of interest in that finished product and plenty of fat on the table afterwards. So that's the simplistic answer to that one. So folks, looking for questions from you guys at this point. We are only 15 minutes into this session. This is going to be one of the shortest Sunday sessions I've ever done. I know it's a popular topic, but there's just simply not a lot of content to it. Derek says, haha, metric shit ton. Yes, absolutely. I'm old school, Derek, so I have been around in the imperial age, but I very much live in the metric world here. I can't see any questions coming through, folks, so I will just do a very quick hello to everyone and remind everyone about those events that we've got coming up. Special events in Brisbane, Sydney and Melbourne in the morning before each of our normal monthly meetups. So if you are interested in that, I've already put the link in the page for you to register for that. Please make sure you register. We are very concerned that we are not going to have enough numbers, so please don't expect to turn up on the day and hope to get in. We have actually expanded the room in all of the venues, and we are still worried that we're not going to get enough people. So really looking forward to what that means with everyone actually joining us. So can see a couple of latecomers coming on, Jeff, Dean and Cam. Folks, extraordinarily short session today. You've pretty much caught the end of it. So Jeff says, hi Rob, hope you're well, see you soon. Yes, mate, I'm recently off the crutches. I've still got a small limp from my knee surgery, but I'm getting much better. So thank you very much. And yes, looking forward to seeing you hopefully in Sydney next time I'm down there, mate. Matthew says, looks like it's very hard to get good profit by doing small development. Your advice is much appreciated. Matthew, that's not quite correct, mate. It's not that it's hard to get the good profit. The process is actually simple. It's the effort that's hard. I want to be very clear on that. And it's because people try to overcomplicate it and they look at too many different strategies in too many different places and they become jack of all trades and master of none. If you become a little bit more scientific over it, if you lock it down to a single strategy, if you lock it down to a single council, and you start to get to know your rules very, very well, then you'll start to become an area expert. And that's where it becomes very easy to do this. Now, it's a little bit of effort to try and get yourself up to skill. But once you're up to skill, it's one of those gifts that just keep on giving, mate. So, yeah, hopefully that helps. Matthew says, in Sydney, great to hear. Jeff says, great to hear. I'll be there. Excellent. Great to hear, folks. Well, short but sweet today. So thank you all very much for this very, very short session. I wish there was much more content to add to this. What I would really love from you guys is, I guess over the next couple of weeks or so, give me some more topics that you want to see on here. I'm basing a lot of these topics on questions that I get from my community, questions that I get from our regular meetups and the mastermind groups and all those sorts of things. But coming up with new content every single week is challenging, just to come up with the idea that the knowledge is in here, but the idea of what you guys want to hear is always what I want to hear. So Jeff's got a question. Can make profits in a lot of markets as long as there is enough margin. Always, mate, it's about the margin. And just while we're talking margin, and I spoke before about a 20% profit on cost, that is, I guess, for one of those larger deals. If you're looking for a much, much smaller deal, one where the duration is much shorter, I have a very different way of actually analyzing my profit on costs. I look at the time value of money. So if a project is going to take 2 years and it gets a 20% return, then if you look at that as an annualized return, that's a 10% annualized return. So every year you get a 10% return. So if you're doing a project that might take 12 months and it gets a 15% return, then when you annualize that, it's actually your money is working harder. So it's a much better deal from a how hard your money is actually working perspective. So I look for a 15% annualized return as my metric. So if I'm doing a simple strategy and I see something where a deal can be turned over in 3 months, then a 7 or 8% return then turns into a 20% annualized return. So I always look at it that way, and makes comparing my projects much, much easier. When I've got 2 projects at the table where I'm assessing which one I want to go into, it's really looking at, well, how hard is my money going to work and how quickly do I get my money back? So hoping that helps, folks. Well, as I can't see anything other than people saying hi at this point, I'm going to say bye, folks. Short and sweet today. Looking forward to seeing you all. If you're in Brisbane, next week on the 15th. If you're in Sydney, the week after on the 22nd. And if you're in Melbourne, on the special date of the 29th of February. So until then, folks, I'm going to say bye for now. Ciao.